everybody, and welcome into another episode of the Lions Grid. It is Friday. It means the weekend's here, Joe, and it also means it's time for another fantasy football focus. Today's episode, of course, going to be dedicated to looking at all things fantasy football. And Joe, we were just talking about it before the show, but let's get the elephant out of the room. Obviously, if you're a fan of the NFL, you've probably already seen Antonio Brown released by the Patriots. He played for them against the Dolphins, looked pretty good, but obviously there was some new information coming out about another accuser and him sending what looked to be intimidating texts to her. So all the fallout from that, the Patriots just decided it was better for the organization to remove themselves from that distraction, and he is no longer with the team.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy, something that you can. You were really. I was really happy to see his success in his career take off and be like a perennial superstar because he's from my school, Central Michigan Chippewas, and it's exciting every time you get a player that makes big news out of the Chippewas organization because they don't have the best football program. And when they do generate a quality NFL player, you like to see them do well. But definitely this is not looking so good. I also drafted him in fantasy football, and I just had to change my lineup, so I put Marvin Jones back in there. And I was thinking Marvin Jones was going to have a good week this week against Philly, and he hasn't gotten a touchdown yet. He's been consistently, the go-to clutch receiver. So I was kind of thinking he was going to have a good goal against Philly, but much rather have Antonio Brown in there for the guaranteed 15 to 25, if not more points. But yeah, definitely seeing this release from the Patriots kind of makes my day because it's like, okay, on one end, I don't get to play him in fantasy football. On the other, the Patriots lose a great talent at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, they most certainly have a plethora of talent there on the offense right now. So, I'm sure fantasy owners of some of the other guys in that offense, Julian Edelman, Josh Gordon, Philip Dorsett, James White, getting one of those pieces out of that crowded offensive group certainly helps out the other fantasy owners because they definitely look to have made a point of using Antonio Brown there against the Dolphins last week. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Antonio Brown. Obviously, this isn't a good look, the text messages and things like that surrounding it. Again, as far as I know, it's all still civil litigation against him in these charges, so there's nothing criminal at the moment, but still, to your point, Joe, not a very good look, and certainly allegations of sexual assault, whether they be criminal charges or just civil litigation, certainly things that you want to try and stay away from. And now that it seems like there are more than one person accusing him of some misconduct, it's going to be interesting to see if he ever plays again in the NFL. He certainly still has the talent. But between everything else that happened with the Raiders and what he's, this current thing, which is certainly more serious, I think, than his antics with the helmet and, getting that frostbite and all that stuff. Certainly, I think the bigger thing are these accusations against him regarding the sexual assaults.
It seems like every week, if not every day, there's a new, news segment devoted to Antonio Brown. It's like the NFL and then Antonio Brown. It's just crazy. There's just way more attention on this individual player. Much like we saw when Brett Favre was like, I'm going to come back out of retirement. Everybody talked about that all summer long. What team's he going to land on and everything. And this year it happens to be what's going on with Antonio Brown. 2 weeks ago it was that video that he posted for the Raiders. People just don't understand me and everything. And then, all right, I just got a big contract with the Patriots, looking for a Super Bowl run. All right, now allegations, now cut. Now I'm back to square one. And it's like, okay, well, what is next for Antonio Brown? Is he going to play again in the NFL? there's got to be some teams that are willing to overlook some of these allegations. I mean, look at the physical assault that some of the players in the past have done to other people, and they've come back into the league and played. I mean, there was Ray Rice, and more recently Kareem Hunt. Ray Rice was older in years, but he did come back for a brief spell. And Kareem Hunt, I think he's still suspended, but I think he is scheduled to come back and play for the Browns. But yeah, you just wonder what this is going to lead to as far as suspension wise, as far as what team is going to take the next risk on him.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure in terms of Ray Rice is the exception to the rule, because Ray Rice is one of the few guys who did not actually play again in the NFL after he got released from the Ravens.
He didn't. My mistake. I thought he played it.
Which is weird, because he's one of the guys that actually, he's done a lot to try and make up for his sins, whereas some of the other guys who are still in the league, they just are like, yep, we did that once, and then they serve their suspension, and then they play and they carry on their merry way. Ray Rice did quite a bit. He's done quite a bit to try and better himself, and then use his story as an example to young people in football to hey, don't make the same mistake. So it's kind of weird that he's the guy that tried to atone for it, and he didn't get a chance to play in the NFL. And then you have players like Kareem Hunt, who I haven't really heard anything positive about what he's done since the incident, and he'll be suiting up here after his suspension's over. So kind of interesting in that regard. But yeah, it'll be. I don't know if Antonio Brown will play again this season for an NFL team. I mean, there's certainly a chance. I think at least here for a couple weeks, people are going to wait to see what else comes out surrounding this issue. But certainly, especially as we get closer to that playoff push, it could be something where somebody takes a pamphlet on him and brings him in to see if he can't come in and help. So this, got through the Antonio Brown stuff. Going to be a chocked full episode, Joe. So I'm going to start off here, and I'm going to run us through all of the we did our episode yesterday taking a look at the injury updates and roster moves. Here's what we know from today. Going to run through the players that are out here first. These are players that are confirmed out for Week 3. Albert Wilson, he is the kind of like the de facto number one receiver for a very awful Miami Dolphins team. Of course, big news, Cam Newton will not be playing here in Week 3. David Njoku, the tight end from the Browns, he is now on IR, so he will be out for at least 8 weeks. Devin Singletary, the running back for the Bills, out. Of course, we talked about it yesterday. Deshaun Jackson is out. Taylor for the 49ers, he's a wide receiver. He is out this week as well. Higbee, the tight end for the Rams, out. Tyler Kroft, who he's coming off a broken foot injury from last season. This was potentially going to be his first game as a Buffalo Bill, in the first game back since that injury. But on Thursday, he injured his ankle, so he is also out this week. And last but not least, Damian Williams, one of the two running backs there for the Chiefs, out this week. So, Joe, I think obviously some of the bigger names there in the out category are Cam Newton. Everyone knew that he wasn't 100%, has a foot injury there. Going to be interesting to see what happens with the Panthers without Cam Newton behind center, although he hasn't looked that effective here in the first 2 weeks of the season.
Yeah, the Panthers, I liked rooting for them when they first made a splash onto the scene, when they had Steve Smith, Deshaun Foster, and I don't know if it was Adrian, some Foster guy that played running back, Mushin Muhammad, Jake Delhomme, when they went into the Super Bowl against the Patriots, and it was a close game all the way through, and then you get the kicker kicks the ball on the sidelines, gets them up to the 40-yard line, and thus, the start, the sequel to Tom Brady's, career Super Bowl drives continues, and then you have that 15-1 season where they get all the way to the Super Bowl, and then they just get rocked by Denver. Denver's defense comes out and destroys them. And I don't know if this is like the tail end of a era with Cam Newton competing for a playoff spot, competing for a division title. I know he's 30 years of age. He had a good season last year before he got injured. But historically, during Cam Newton's era at quarterback for the Panthers, they've never really had a go-to wide receiver. Their defense has a couple playmakers, but, it's like they're in the situation where they have them, they develop them, and then they leave and go somewhere else to play football. And you just think to yourself, are the Panthers ever going to be relevant again during the time of Cam Newton's career, from present time and onward? This injury is going to be one to, probably sit him out, like you said, this week, next week. He might be iffy or whatever, but definitely this is going to be a make or break season for him, as he'll play next season as the starter, of course, but I mean, like, whether or not Carolina is going to be relevant.
Certainly. And you got to wonder if it's kind of a similar situation there to what the Colts had with Andrew Luck, with Cam Newton, because both of them very young, very talented QBs that I think those franchises maybe took advantage of, in the sense that they didn't do enough to get them the protection they needed to keep them healthy long term for their career. Obviously, Cam Newton's been banged up here a little bit these last couple of seasons. Andrew Luck, of course, just retiring, at the start of this season because his body just couldn't take it anymore. He wasn't, healing as fast as he should be from injuries. Kind of interesting to see if it's not a similar thing there with Cam Newton, where he's just been abused so much through his career that he just can't get healthy, and if he can't get healthy, he's not going to be as productive. So going to be interesting to see what happens there with Cam Newton. Would like to see him get back to that MVP form that he's shown, but it's one of those things where he just can't seem to get healthy. And to Andy Welsh's point there about Darwin Thompson having a big opportunity for the Chiefs, we talked about Damon Williams being out. I can see my dad already answered there, but LaShawn McCoy is questionable for this game, so certainly an opportunity in that Chiefs backfield with the number one and number two backs banged up. Certainly an opportunity there for Darwin Thompson to carve out a role. Sticking with the questionable players, we also have Alshon Jeffrey with the Eagles, Dallas Goedert, another Panther in Greg Olsen. Jimmy Graham is also questionable headed into the Sunday. Marlon Mack with the Colts, T.Y. Hilton, another tight end in Mark Andrews. Mike Badgley, the kicker for the Chargers, is still listed as questionable headed into Week 3. Rashad Penny, Benny Fowler for the Giants, and then Higgins with the Rashard Higgins with the Browns, also listed as questionable this week. And then a little more questionable than questionable, you have Demaryius Thomas for the Jets, listed as doubtful. So as Jeff pointed out earlier, he was sort of the sacrificial lamb from the Patriots roster to make room for Antonio Brown. Very interesting there that he has yet to get on the field and make an impact for the Jets. Of course, they have all their QB issues with Luke Falk getting the start there. And, yep, as pointed out, Fisher, another one of the CMU grads there for the Kansas City Chiefs, the tackle, he will be missing this game as well. So potentially could have an impact on Pat Mahomes in the offense, but really I think Pat Mahomes is pretty much a must start unless you have a better option, which it's kind of hard to have.
Yeah, I was looking at my tight end situation on my fantasy football, and since this is fantasy football focus, I was looking at the starting tight end for the Los Angeles Rams, and can't remember his name offhand. I think it's Cooper Kupp or something, and he's listed as questionable. And then I picked up Trey Burton from the tight end from the Bears who was effective last season, and he's listed as questionable as well. So I just have Delaney Walker in there now. And aside from that, in my other league, I got Vance McDonald starting over Delaney. But yeah, I just don't know how to find a backup tight end because, I look at the Rams starting tight end. He wasn't effective in week 1. And then Trey Burton, he's was effective last season, hasn't really done too much this season. Both guys are dealing with little nagging injuries already early on in the season. So do you have any idea of, what that might entail?
Well, tight ends are always a very tricky position, in my opinion. Really, their value comes from their ability to catch touchdown passes, and that's really who's going to determine who's going to have the better day for you at the tight end spot. So I know that's something currently my dad's struggling with on his roster. He has Eric Ebron, Jimmy Graham. The first week he had Jimmy Graham in. He caught the touchdown pass, had the better day. Then he didn't have Eric Ebron in last week, but last week Eric Ebron was the guy that caught the touchdown, so he had he ended up would have scoring more points having him in. Tight ends are definitely one of those positions where their ability to get into the end zone is really going to help give them value because most of your tight ends aren't going to have more than 5 receptions in a game, and they're not going to accumulate a bunch of yards. So really where you're getting the value is guys who have a nose for getting open in the end zone. And so if you're struggling to find somebody, that's my recommendation. I doubt there's going to be anybody out on the free agency that has too many touchdowns to their name. But if you're looking for a tight end in particular, touchdowns I feel like is the stat to keep an eye on because that's really what's going to help give you some points. And let's just quickly run through the people that are active here for this week, and then we'll move on to the Stardom and Situm segment of the show. So active, we do have what's his name? David Moore. Sorry, spaced out on his first name. David Moore's making his first game back with the Seahawks against the Saints. We also have Dontrell Hilliard coming off a concussion, should be back for Cleveland and should be their number 2 back moving forward. Of course, breath of the Steelers fans can, take a big exhale here because James Conner is going to be back here for week 3. No major knee injury there. Josh Jacobs for the Raiders active, along with Tyrell Williams. Sterling Shepard should be a go for the Giants. And then Sutton for the Broncos should be back as well this week. So going to be interesting to see if he can't help out a Broncos offense that has been rather struggling. But, certainly I don't think projects much higher than a wide receiver 4. So depending on how your league's set up, he's not going to be the most impactful guy.
Quick question.
Yeah, go for it.
Stardom Situm. Who would you go with? David Montgomery in the wide receiver, running back, tight end position, or Sterling Shepard?
I have to imagine I would probably go with Sterling Shepard just because the Bears' offense hasn't looked great, and Sterling Shepard with him. So Corey Latimer's a no-go for the Giants. Benny Fowler's beat up. Sterling Shepard's like the only wide receiver they have, and he is coming off an injury himself, so there might be a little bit of rust there. But with Daniel Jones taking over the offense, I would imagine he's probably going to lean pretty heavy on the veteran receiver and Sterling Shepard. Of course, Golden Tate's still suspended as well, so Sterling Shepard's it. So I think I would go with Sterling Shepard in that just because of the potential for him to eat up a lot of those receptions. And then on the Bears side of things, I just really haven't liked what I've seen out of their offense. But, certainly.
One thing to note about David Montgomery, he only got like 5 carries in week 1. And then in week 2, he put up over 50 yards on 13 carries or more. So are we seeing the transition from Tyreek Cohen to David Montgomery?
I think what they're going to try and do is probably go to an approach that's similar that they've had in the past, where when they had Howard as their main back, he was sort of Jordan Howard was like their featured back, and then Tyreek Cohen would come in on third downs and sort of serve as that like change of tempo back, and like the guy that was going to make plays out of the backfield, sort of touching the ball in sort of unconventional running back ways. And I think really the goal is to have David Montgomery sort of inherit that Jordan Howard role, become like the main first and second down back, and then have Tyreek Cohen continue to play that role he played when Howard was with the team. And yeah, in terms of your question there, Andy, about starting two running backs with the 49ers, it is a little bit of a gamble. The Steelers' defense hasn't been awful against the run, I don't believe. But they certainly, anytime you're starting two, especially at the running back position, you're really counting on that offensive line and the 49ers to have a really good game, because if they don't, you're sort of painted yourself into a corner, and if it's a bad game, it's going to hurt you twofold, because a bad game means both those running backs are going to struggle, which means you're going to struggle to score points. So oftentimes I try to avoid that, but if you have a really good feeling about what the 49ers are going to do on Sunday against the Steelers, I'm not going to say no, but I will say that it is something to watch out for. And moving now into the Stardom Situm segment, Joe, what we're going to be doing with this moving forward is each week we're going to sort of spotlight, I guess, a different fantasy football experts' projections. This week we're looking at Michael Fabiano from the NFL. He's their senior fantasy analyst. So taking a look here at who he has starting at QB, he says to start Dak Prescott, Russell Wilson, Matt Ryan, and Lamar Jackson. Not really any surprises there, Joe.
One thing.
Yeah.
I have both Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson in both my leagues starting, but the question is whether or not Dak Prescott is going to have a better game against his opponent than Deshaun Watson, because I also have Deshaun Watson. I've chosen to go with Dak Prescott as of right now instead of Deshaun Watson.
Dak Prescott is playing the Miami Dolphins. I say it's kind of a no-brainer. If someone's playing the Dolphins this season, they're the starter. So I got to go with Dak in that. I do like Deshaun Watson, but so far they've sort of struggled to put up fantasy points so far in this early season. Again, I chose the Texans as my Super Bowl pick in the preseason, so I'm hoping they'll get things figured out. But you got Dak going up against Miami. I think you're in store for a pretty good fantasy football day on Sunday. On the Stidham side of things, Michael Fabiano is recommending to sit, and Joe, I think you'll agree with that first one there. Jared Goff, Andy Dalton, Derek Carr, and Mitchell Trubisky are his four big sit-ems this week. I know, Joe, you've talked about how you haven't been impressed with what you've seen from the Rams offense, and you can see here Michael Fabiano agreeing with you by saying, maybe I know he pointed out in the article, that the offense has been rather sluggish here the first couple of weeks, and doesn't think that's necessarily going to change here in week 3. Moving on to the running back position, starting, he has Aaron Jones. He also has Sonny Michel, Ingram, and Chris Carson. I was forgetting what his name was. Chris Carson is the other guy he has there for the Seahawks. So, Aaron Jones sort of came alive last week. Sonny Michel has been pretty consistent for the Patriots. And then, of course, Mark Ingram. One of the things that I think you're going to notice here as a trend with Michael Fabiano's rankings, there's a lot of Baltimore Ravens on the offensive side of things because the Chiefs' defense is not very good, which equals an opportunity for a lot of fantasy points. So no real big surprises here. The only guy that I'm kind of hesitant to say is Chris Carson. He's been a guy who's popped up in people's stardom rankings before, but I can't really maybe I just haven't paid as close of attention to him because he's never been my fantasy football running back. But I feel like he hasn't had any like big games. It's not like he's ever put up Le'Veon Bell numbers or Todd Gurley numbers or anything like that. So, uh, you know, it, I did see other people also recommending Chris Carson as I was taking a look, but certainly take that with a grain of salt. They are playing the Saints, whose defense hasn't been very good. Uh, they've given up, I want to say, 240 rushing yards so far this season after 2 weeks. So certainly an opportunity for Chris Carson and the Seahawks there. And with Rashard Penny being questionable heading into the game, he should get the bulk of the touches. So it does. I mean, it makes sense. That one I'm just still a little hesitant on. Moving to the sit-em side of things, you can see there's a Miami Dolphin there, Mr. Kenyon Drake. But there's also James White, Philip Lindsay, and as we talked about earlier, Joe, Tariq Cohen is the fourth guy there. And a big part of that, I think, is the shift with David Montgomery playing a bigger role in that backfield, with him taking over some of the carries. That means less of a chance for Tariq Cohen to score points. Of course, Kenyon Drake on the Dolphins. Dolphins are awful. So yeah, he's just not going to do it for you. I know heading into the season, a lot of people were feeling pretty good about him. And then they decided they were going to go full tank mode. And now, please don't start anybody who's a Dolphin. It's not going to do you any good. Just let him go. Just go. Philip Lindsay, I had him on my fantasy football team last year, and he was really good. Came in clutch out of nowhere. I picked him up as a free agent, and did well for me. So far this season, he's struggled to repeat that success, and unfortunately for him, Royce Freeman, who he was splitting time with last year, who didn't get a hot hand, is kind of got the hot hand here, even though the Broncos have been struggling offensively. He's been at least the slightly hotter hand, and now he seems to be splitting even more time, more of the carries with Philip Lindsay. Philip Lindsay is splitting more times with Royce Freeman. Philip Lindsay I get why Fabiano has him there as the sit, because it looks like Freeman's going to be playing a bigger role, and he just hasn't looked as good as he did early on. And then, of course, he has James White here before the Antonio Brown news broke today. So with Antonio Brown gone, certainly an opportunity for him to play a bigger role in that passing offense. There's one less mouth to feed, and if you are playing in a PPR league, James White typically gets a few receptions. So without another wide receiver there, he could stand to prosper. Moving to the wide receiver side of things, Fabiano has Chris Goodwin, the wide receiver for Tampa Bay, the Lions' very own Kenny Galladay, Larry Fitzgerald, and then the cousin of Antonio Brown, I'm not sure how to pronounce it, Marquez
Hollywood Brown.
Yeah, let's go Hollywood Brown. Much easier to say, Hollywood Brown there. And like I said, in the stardom segment, you're going to see a lot of Ravens, because that Chiefs defense is pretty bad. But yeah, Chris Goodwin, I think he's had some pretty good games across these first two. He's not like obviously Mike Evans is the number one receiver down in Tampa Bay, but Bruce Arians seems to like finding ways to get him open, and despite all of the struggles that Jameis Winston is having, he seems to be able to get the ball into his hands reliably. So not the most flashy wide receiver, but a guy that can get you some points there. And of course, I think these other three guys, Larry, Galladay, and Hollywood. Hollywood has definitely shown that he can put up some big numbers. Galladay showing that he could be the number one wide receiver for the Lions, and then Larry Fitzgerald is sort of ageless and keeps it going strong. Taking a look at who Fabiano has on the sit-em, and again, he might end up. This was again before the news broke that Antonio Brown was out, but you can see up there is Josh Gordon. He's the Patriot. There's also Mike Williams for the Chargers, Terry McLaurin for the Redskins, and then Jarvis Landry with the Browns. I personally have Jarvis Landry, it's been a struggle. I was happy that, OBJ had a big week last week, but I would have liked some of that to go a little bit to Jarvis Landry. If it was me, I'd throw to OBJ one play, and then I'd go back and hit Landry on the next. But so far, the Browns don't seem to share my offensive philosophy, so that hasn't generated a lot of fantasy points. Mike Williams, of course, is battling through a knee injury, so he did play last week, but this is sort of the second week against it, and going up against the Texans could be a little bit of a struggle there for him. And again, Josh Gordon was up there prior to them releasing Antonio Brown, so I'm sure that changes the equation a little bit there. Again, with another mouth to feed gone, certainly an opportunity for Gordon to step up there. Next, Michael Fabiano, his stardoms at tight end. He's got Evan Ingram, Vance McDonald, Joe, who you're starting and he would agree with. Mark Andrews, who is, as we pointed out when we went through the injury portion of the show, is marked as questionable. So make sure that you're keeping an eye on him to see if he is a go on Sunday or not. But again, he's playing the Chiefs, and he's already had good production the first 2 weeks. Chiefs defense is awful. Darren Waller for the Raiders rounds up his top four. That one is mostly based off of the role he's playing for the Raiders. He's found a way to become a big part of their offense. He's on the field I think 95% of the plays. But they are going up against the Vikings, who are a tough defense. But last week they did show some vulnerability against the Packers. So it's one of those things where because he's on the field for 95% of the offensive snaps, and has found a way to, I think he's number one on the team in targets too. It certainly makes a case for him if you're looking at the tight end spot, and maybe someone that other people aren't super familiar with. So Darren Waller, Oakland Raiders, if you're looking for a tight end, he might be available for you. On the sit-em side of things, and this pains me a little bit because our boy TJ Hawkinson is there, who is also my tight end. Had a big week one and then sort of disappeared against the Chargers. I'm hoping here against the Eagles, even though Michael Fabiano has him as a sit, I'm hoping they decide to get him involved in the offense because my fantasy team needs that. Eric Ebron's also up there, Tyler Eifert, and Kyle Rudolph rounding out the tight ends. Fabiano has as sits this week. And really I want to, Kyle Rudolph, the inconsistencies with the Vikings offense. Eifert, the Buffalo Bills actually have a pretty good defense. You can't sleep on them. So that could be a rough game for Cincinnati. And then Eric Ebron, Jack Doyle definitely seemed to play more of the snaps. I want to say he played 72 of the offensive percent of the snaps compared to Ebron's 46. But again, if Eric Ebron gets out there and catches a touchdown, that's contribution to your team. So I definitely think Eric Ebron moving forward is going to be a guy where his value is going to be if he can catch a touchdown pass or not in the week. And so going here against the Falcons, it's kind of up to you. But they've only surrendered since 2017, their last 34 games, they've only given up 9 touchdowns to tight ends. So that's quite a low margin for several games. So might not be the best pick if you're counting on Eric Ebron to get that touchdown to score you points. Might be a good week to have him on the bench if you have someone else you can sub in. Talking quickly about the kickers. On the stardom side of things, Robbie Gould kicks off the list. Then you also have the Panthers kicker, and he's a newer guy. His name's Joe Sly, I want to say. I think this is his first year as the main kicker for the Panthers, but I guess he could have been there previously, and I just didn't notice. Totally possible. I don't pay super close attention to kickers, but moving on from him, sticking in that same game because the Panthers are playing the Cardinals, Zane Gonzalez with the Cardinals, and then Brett Maher, who hasn't scored a whole lot of points here in the first 2 weeks, but again, Dallas is playing Miami. If you have somebody on Dallas who can get you points, it's a good week to start him.
I got the Cardinals kicker in both of my leagues right now. I replaced Vinatieri, and I think I replaced somebody else too. But yeah, he's been putting up the points for a kicker.
Yeah, I think he's scored like the majority of the Cardinals' points have been him kicking. I want to say the last 2 weeks he's kicked at least 3 field goals in the first half or something like that. He's had at least 3 field goals in each game, maybe is it. But he's certainly been doing a lot of work. So a good guy to have in if he's an option. On the Sidham side of things, Fabiano not liking Chris Boswell going up against the 49ers. Matt Bryant going up against the Colts. Fairbairn going up against the Chargers. And then Eddie Perino, who's the Bears kicker, who did nail a game-winning field goal last week against the Broncos. He's not recommending having him go against Washington on Monday night. Finishing it out, we'll take a look at defenses and special teams. Last week, of course, against the Dolphins, the Patriots defense scored a crap ton of points. Of course, this week, their opponent is the New York Jets. So if you own the New England Patriots defense, it might not be as good of a week, but you're still looking good heading into week 3. Yeah.
It's just unfair. You know, the Patriots need to have a division rival in the division that actually challenges them instead of just playing these teams that just say, what's the point? The Patriots are in our division. We can't compete with them.
Yeah, you certainly have the Jets and the Dolphins who look like they're going to be competing for, early round picks. Who's going to have the earliest pick? It looks like it's going to be the Dolphins because I don't know if they're going to get a win. The Jets at some point will get Sam Darnold back, and I think they're going to try to continue to be competitive. But, yeah, it definitely looks like the Jets are going to have to wait till next season to really step up their game. And then maybe the Bills are going to come out and be the surprise team. You can see their defense here, a stardom for Fabiano. Of course, they are also playing the Bengals, who can be, as I mentioned, led by Andy Dalton, who can struggle. He's been sacked 9 times in the first 2 weeks, too. So certainly a chance there if you have the Bills defense to get some points. And then the Packers against the Broncos. And as mentioned before, the Cowboys are playing those awful Dolphins and should look to cash in there. On the Sidham side of things, the Baltimore Ravens, who do have a pretty good defense, the Cardinals were able to find success against them, and they didn't score a whole lot of fantasy points last week. I think if you're in a standard league, I think it was a 4-point performance against the Cardinals. In the Chiefs offense, yes, they're going to be missing Eric Fisher, so there is an opportunity there, but it's still Patrick Mahomes. I agree with Fabiano. If you have it depends, of course, who you have as your defenses. But if you have the ability to sit the Ravens this week, might be a good call there. And then the Steelers against the 49ers, the Saints against the Seahawks, and then the Broncos against the Packers are his recommendations for sits there. And yeah, I mean, the Steelers' defense has given up 30.5 points a game and over 440 total yards of offense. So they've been rather porous here in the first couple of weeks. The 49ers are 2-0. A chance here to go 3-0. So I get why he has their defense as a sit. And then on the Saints side of things, not only do you have the struggles that the Saints defense has had on playing a pretty good offense in Seattle, but then you have, Drew Brees is out, Teddy Bridgewater and Taysom Hill, some combination of them is going to be filling in. So if that offense isn't clicking, it's going to keep that defense on the field, and the defense is already struggling. So it's kind of a recipe for disaster there for the Saints, which kind of makes sense why he has them there as a sit-em. But those are Michael Fabiano's recommendations for stardom and sit-em this week. As I mentioned, moving forward, what we'll do is we'll sort of highlight a different fantasy football expert or guru throughout the season. This week, again, our person supplying the stardom sit-ems is Michael Fabiano, senior fantasy analyst for NFL.com. next week we'll take a look at somebody else. Just because, obviously, Joe, as we were talking about before the show, there's a lot of opinions on fantasy football. There's a lot of networks at this point that, pay people pretty good salary to keep track of it. So good to get some opinions from different sources because, anytime you're doing any sort of predictions, it can be, as we've come to find out doing our pick'em, and especially on Thursday night football, it can be tough.
We're 0 for 3 on Thursday night football. All three of our picks have been the exact same, and every team we expect to win comes out and they can't put up any points. All these, favorite teams that we pick to win, for some reason on Thursday night, they just show up and they don't play football.
Yeah, it's been rough. And so at this point, we should probably just create a poll to see when will be the first week when we actually when one of us can predict the actual winner for Thursday night. Because, we're 0 for 3 here so far to start off the season. It's been a little rough. But, of course, we'll be doing our normal pigment segment tomorrow. So if you want to see an update of where we are, I'm not going to spoil the overall records. But we did split last week, Joe, so I still do have that 3-game advantage. But certainly a chance here moving into week 3 for you to close the distance, or maybe we'll split again. Who knows? We'll have to see. And if you're interested, be sure to tune in tomorrow for the show. But yeah, if you did enjoy our fantasy football focus here, we do this every Friday, so you're more than welcome to come back and do this again. We'll be here, like I said, next week. We will choose a different fantasy football expert to go over their stardom and situm picks. If you have any recommendations for who you'd like to see us cover, feel free in the comment sections of the video to go ahead and post a name. Happy to take a look at some different guys if you have any opinions there. But if you did enjoy today's show, please do help the channel grow. Hit that like button to help support this particular video. The best way to help the channel itself, though, is to hit the subscribe button. So if you're not a subscriber, we thank you for tuning in and watching. But if you want to help us out and go a little extra, just hitting that subscribe button is probably the best way to do it. We're working towards getting 100 subscribers so we can get our custom URL for the channel. And we're making good progress, but certainly still a ways to go there. So if you can and you're willing to, please consider supporting us. And then if you want to be kept up to date when all our videos are going live, you can, of course, ring the bell there as well. And when we go live tomorrow for our NFL Pick'em segment, you'll get a notification either in your browser or on your phone, and you can join us tomorrow for the Pick'em. But that'll do it for today. I'm Kevin Marheine. He's Joe Wilmot. We'll catch you back for the next video tomorrow. Have a good night, everybody.